Captain Elias Voss sat in the cockpit of his starship, Sol Invictus, sipping on a bitter cup of synthesized coffee. Outside, the swirling colors of the Helix Nebula cast an eerie glow over the control panels, painting the dimly lit cabin in shades of blue and violet. The nebula was a ghostly spectacle of cosmic dust, a place where light and shadows played tricks on the sensors, making navigation treacherous. The Sol Invictus was a small exploration vessel, designed for deep space expeditions that most other captains would shy away from. But Elias had never been one to walk the beaten path. After years of running supply missions and transporting cargo for the Earth Coalition, he'd grown tired of the monotony and sought something more adventurous, even if that meant heading into the unknown corners of the galaxy. His autopilot hummed softly as the ship drifted through the nebula. Everything was calm, and Elias found himself thinking he might actually have a quiet day for once. That was until his comm system suddenly crackled to life. "Distress, any vessel in range, please, help." The message was faint, barely coherent. Elias frowned, setting his cup down as he reached for the controls. His fingers danced over the console, trying to clean up the signal. The message came through clearer this time, though still broken: abandoned, need assistance, dying. Elias' eyes narrowed. In his years of space travel, he'd encountered more than his fair share of traps. Pirates were known to broadcast fake distress calls to lure in unsuspecting ships. But this didn't sound like a trap, it sounded desperate. It was raw, filled with fear and pain. He pulled up the coordinates linked to the transmission. It was coming from deep within the nebula, far from any known trade routes or colonies. The prudent thing to do would be to ignore it after all. No one would blame him if he turned a blind eye. But something in that voice struck a chord deep within him. Maybe it was his conscience, or maybe it was that old instinct that had driven him to become a starship captain in the first place. "Damn it," Elias muttered to himself, flipping a series of switches to bring the engines to full power. "All right, let's see what kind of mess you've gotten yourself into, Voss." He punched in the coordinates and set a course. The ship's engines roared to life, propelling the Sol Invictus deeper into the swirling clouds of the nebula. As he flew deeper into the cosmic dust, the navigation system struggled to keep up. The density of the gas clouds played havoc with his sensors, and he was forced to switch to manual controls. The distress signal grew stronger as he approached. His scanners finally picked up a faint outline: a small, heavily damaged spacecraft, barely holding itself together. Elias could see sparks flickering across its hull, a sure sign that its life support systems were on the brink of failure. Docking his ship alongside the derelict vessel, Elias grabbed his blaster, just in case, and pulled on his helmet. The airlock hissed open, and he stepped into the cold, dark interior of the alien ship. It was silent, save for the faint hum of a failing power core. The emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows down the narrow corridors. The air was thin and cold, carrying the faint, metallic tang of burned circuits. As he moved cautiously through the corridors, Elias found himself holding his breath. He had no idea what he would find. Pirates? Hostile aliens? The possibilities were endless, and none of them were good. But instead of danger, what he found was something entirely unexpected. At the far end of the corridor, huddled together in a dark corner, were three small figures. As he approached, they turned to face him, their eyes wide with fear. They were clearly not human. Their features were delicate and otherworldly, each of them distinct in appearance. The tallest among them had smooth, sapphire blue skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Glowing, intricate patterns ran down her arms, like veins filled with bioluminescent light. She stared at Elias with cautious but intelligent eyes. Beside her was a much smaller girl with translucent wings folded tightly against her back, her skin pale and almost porcelain-like. The third, the smallest, had hair that seemed to float around her face as if she were underwater, her eyes a deep, mesmerizing shade of violet. They were frightened, exhausted, and clearly on the brink of collapse. Elias knelt down, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. It's okay, he said softly, lowering his blaster. I'm not here to hurt you. The girls flinched at his words, their alien eyes studying him warily. They didn't understand his language, and the universal translator in his helmet struggled to decipher their dialect. The oldest of the three, the one with the glowing veins, hesitated before taking a step forward. She spoke in a soft, melodic language that Elias couldn't understand, but her tone was filled with urgency. Realizing they were too weak to communicate further, Elias made a quick decision. I can't leave you here, he said, hoping they would understand his intent if not his words. He activated a holographic display from his wrist, showing the outline of his ship, and pointed toward the airlock. You're coming with me. After a tense pause, the girls nodded. They were too exhausted to protest, and whatever had brought them here had left them with no options. Elias gently helped them to their feet, one by one. The youngest, whose hair floated like tendrils, clung to his arm, her eyes filled with silent gratitude. As they made their way back to the Sol Invictus, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped into something far bigger than he could imagine. These girls were not ordinary refugees. There was something special, perhaps even dangerous, about them. But whatever it was, he couldn't turn his back now. Once they were safely aboard his ship, Elias sealed the airlock and powered up the engines. He glanced back at the three girls, who were now seated quietly in the cargo bay, looking around with a mix of fear and awe. He was now responsible for them, whether he liked it or not. As the Sol Invictus lifted off and soared back into the depths of the nebula, Elias couldn't shake a single, nagging thought: who had abandoned these girls in such a dire state? And why? Little did he know, the answer to that question would set him on a path that would change not only his life, but the fate of the galaxy itself. The Sol Invictus cruised steadily away from the Helix Nebula, leaving the swirling cosmic dust behind. Inside the ship, Captain Elias Voss leaned back in the pilot's chair, his brow furrowed in concentration. The three alien girls were now safely aboard, but the mystery of their origins weighed heavily on his mind. The cargo bay had been hastily converted into a makeshift mid-bay. The girls were seated on crates draped with thermal blankets, their large eyes observing everything around them with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. They huddled together, whispering in their melodic language that Elias still couldn't fully understand. After locking the ship on autopilot, Elias made his way to the cargo bay. The girls looked up as he entered, their expressions a blend of fear and hope. He needed to earn their trust, but first, he had to figure out how to communicate with them. All right, Elias said, kneeling down to their level. We need to find a way to talk. You understand me? He tapped the side of his helmet, hoping the translator would catch on. The oldest girl, the one with the bioluminescent veins, tilted her head slightly, as if trying to comprehend his words. Her eyes flickered with intelligence, and Elias had the distinct impression that she was trying to figure him out just as much as he was trying to understand her. The translator was working overtime, but it was still struggling to decode their unique dialect. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, a portable translator that could scan speech patterns and adapt to unfamiliar languages. He set it down between them, activating its analysis mode. Let's try this, he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. Say something. The girl hesitated, then spoke in her alien tongue. The translator beeped, its lights blinking as it processed the data. After a few tense moments, it emitted a mechanical voice. We thank you for help. Elias's eyes widened in surprise. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Good, he said, nodding encouragingly. What are your names? The translator crackled for a moment before delivering their responses. I am Nara, said the oldest, her voice now faintly understandable through the translator. Her sapphire blue skin shimmered as she spoke, the glowing veins beneath her skin pulsing gently. I am Talia, said the middle one, her delicate wings fluttering slightly. She had an ethereal beauty that reminded Elias of the old stories of fey creatures back on Earth. The youngest, the one with floating hair, stepped forward shyly. I am Iona. Nara, Talia, and Iona, Elias repeated, giving them a reassuring smile. I'm Elias. You're safe here, all right? No one's going to hurt you. The three girls exchanged uncertain glances. It was clear they wanted to believe him, but they had been through too much to trust a stranger so easily. Elias needed answers, but he also needed to tread carefully. He pointed at his chest. Human, he said, then gestured to them with a questioning look. What species are you? Nara hesitated, looking at the other two before replying. The translator hummed and finally spoke. We are Tetherian. Tetherian. That name rang no bells. Elias had been to countless systems and met dozens of alien species, but he'd never heard of the Tetherians before. He kept his expression neutral, not wanting to alarm them. Where are you from? He asked softly. Nara's expression darkened, and her eyes seemed to lose their glow. Our world destroyed, she managed, her voice filled with pain. The Zavrak, they came and took everything. The Zavrak Consortium. Now that was a name Elias knew, and it sent a chill down his spine. The Consortium was a ruthless faction known for enslaving and exploiting entire species, especially those with unique abilities. They operated in the shadows, beyond the reach of most galactic laws, and were feared throughout the galaxy. If these girls had escaped the Zavrak, it was a miracle they were still alive. Why would they target you? Elias asked, his voice tinged with concern. Nara glanced at Talia and Iona, who looked down as if reliving some painful memory. We have gifts, Nara said slowly. They wanted to use us as weapons. The translator struggled with her words, but Elias got the gist of it. The Zavrak must have seen the Tetherians' abilities as potential assets in their endless quest for power. Elias had seen firsthand what the Consortium did to those they enslaved, reduced to tools, stripped of any individuality. That explains why they were abandoned, Elias thought grimly. They must have escaped somehow. Elias felt a pang of guilt. He had thought this mission was just another routine survey. Now, he had stumbled into something far more dangerous. And if the Zavrak had tracked them this far, they were undoubtedly on their way. All right, he said, his tone more resolute. We need to keep you safe. I don't know how much time we have before they find us again, but I'll do everything I can. Nara's eyes widened in surprise. You will help us? The translator barely caught the hopeful tremor in her voice. Yes, Elias said without hesitation. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. We'll find a way to keep you hidden. The tension in the room eased slightly. The girls seemed to relax, if only for a moment. Talia fluttered her wings, releasing a faint, sweet scent into the air. Elias felt his shoulders loosen, his mind calming as if a gentle breeze had swept away the weight of his worries. What did you do? Elias asked, blinking in confusion. Talia smiled shyly. My gift. To calm emotions. Elias gave a soft chuckle. That's one useful ability, especially with how stressful space can be. Iona, the youngest, tugged on his sleeve, her wide eyes filled with curiosity. Can you show us your gift? Elias paused, confused. I don't have any special powers, Iona. I'm just a human. Iona looked at him in wonder. But you saved us, she said softly. You are special. Before Elias could respond, the ship's alarms blared to life. The girls tensed up, their eyes wide with panic. Elias quickly ran to the cockpit, his heart pounding. As he scanned the radar, his worst fears were confirmed. A cluster of Zavrak ships had just emerged from hyperspace. Damn it, Elias cursed under his breath. They must have tracked the distress signal. He rushed back to the cargo bay, where the girls were now trembling in fear. We're out of time, he said urgently. They found us. I need your help if we're going to get out of this alive. Nara nodded, her glowing veins pulsing with renewed energy. We will fight. Elias didn't waste another second. He guided them to the control panels, explaining the ship's defensive systems as best as he could. Nara placed her hands on the console, her eyes glowing brighter as she manipulated the energy fields. Talia fluttered her wings and focused, releasing waves of calming pheromones to keep Elias and the girls focused amid the chaos. Iona concentrated, her hair floating as she tapped into the water reserves in the ship, ready to unleash a defense. The first volley from the Zavrak ships struck the Sol Invictus, sending a shudder through its frame. Elias gritted his teeth, steering the ship into an evasive pattern. Nara, we need a shield. Talia, Iona, get ready. As the girls combined their powers, the Sol Invictus became a whirlwind of energy, deflecting the consortium's attacks. But even with their combined efforts, Elias knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The Zavrak were relentless. Hang on. Elias shouted as he punched in the coordinates for a hyperspace jump. We're getting out of here. The girls held on tightly as the ship shuddered and groaned. With a flash of light, the Sol Invictus shot into hyperspace, leaving the Zavrak behind at least for now. Breathless and exhausted, Elias slumped back in his seat. The girls were equally drained, their powers nearly depleted. But for now, they were safe. Nara looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you. Elias, she whispered. You saved us. Elias smiled, though his mind was already racing with new questions. The Zavrak would not give up so easily, and now he had 3 powerful fugitives on board. But as he looked at the girls, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose. No matter what it took, he would protect them. He had made that promise, and he intended to keep it. The Sol Invictus streaked through hyperspace, the stars outside stretching into long, shimmering trails of light. In the cockpit, Captain Elias Voss leaned back, his hand still gripping the controls with white knuckles. The tense silence in the air was broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines as they hurtled toward safety, or so he hoped. Behind him, Nara, Talia, and Iona sat strapped into their seats, exhaustion etched into their alien features. Their combined efforts to fend off the Zavrak assault had drained them, leaving them barely able to sit upright. Yet, there was a glimmer of hope in their eyes. This human had saved them not once, but twice now. But Elias knew better than to get comfortable. The Zavrak consortium was relentless, and if they had tracked the girls this far, they wouldn't stop until they were captured. He couldn't afford to slow down, but the ship's systems were straining from the recent skirmish, and they were running out of time. Elias toggled a switch on his comm system, reaching out to the girls. How are you holding up back there? Nara's voice came through, weak but steady. We are tired. But we can fight again, if needed. Elias shook his head. No. You've done enough. I'll handle it from here. Just as the words left his mouth, a loud, jarring alarm blared through the cockpit. The red warning lights flashed ominously, indicating an imminent threat. Elias cursed under his breath as the ship's sensors picked up multiple signatures emerging from hyperspace behind them. The Zavrak had managed to track their jump. They're back, Elias muttered, more to himself than to the girls. He brought the ship out of hyperspace, and the stars collapsed back into fixed points in the vast darkness. Before them loomed a dense asteroid field, a chaotic expanse of tumbling rocks illuminated by the faint light of a distant sun. The perfect place for a last stand or a hiding spot. We've got company. Elias shouted over the ship's intercom. Hang on tight. I'm going to try to lose them in the rocks. Elias pushed the Sol Invictus to its limits, diving headlong into the asteroid field. Behind him, the sleek, black ships of the Zavrak consortium followed in close pursuit, their crimson lights casting an ominous glow across the tumbling asteroids. Nara, Talia, Iona, get to the defense systems. Elias commanded, sweat beading on his forehead. He knew he was asking a lot, But there was no other choice. They needed every advantage if they were going to survive. Inside the belly of the ship in the cargo bay, Nara struggled to her feet, her bioluminescent veins flickering weakly. "I will handle the shields," she said, determination hardening her voice. Talia and Iona nodded, each taking their positions. Talia fluttered her delicate wings, her concentration growing as she prepared to release her calming pheromones to keep everyone focused. Iona, with her hair floating like tendrils, reached out toward the control panel for the ship's water reserves. Nara placed her hands on the shield generator, her glowing veins pulsing brighter as she channeled her remaining energy into the ship's defenses. An ethereal blue field enveloped the Sol Invictus, deflecting the first barrage of plasma fire from the pursuing ships. "I can't hold this for long," Nara called out, her voice strained. In the cockpit, Elias pushed the ship into a steep dive, weaving between the spinning asteroids with razor-sharp precision. The Zavrak fighters pursued, firing their pulse cannons in rapid bursts. Explosions rocked the ship, sending sparks cascading from the control panels. "Damn it," Elias growled. "These guys don't give up." A particularly close blast sent the Sol Invictus careening off course. Elias struggled to regain control, his fingers flying across the controls. He glanced at his radar screen. It was flooded with red blips. The Zavrak were closing in fast. "Nara, I need more power to the shields," Elias yelled, trying to keep the panic from his voice. "I'm trying." Nara's voice crackled through the intercom. She was running on fumes, her energy reserves nearly depleted. Elias clenched his jaw. They needed an edge, something to turn the tide. "Iona, can you do something with the water reserves?" he asked, a sudden idea forming in his mind. Iona's eyes widened as she realized what he meant. "Yes. I can freeze it," she replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Do it," Elias commanded. Iona closed her eyes, focusing intently. The water reserves in the ship's tanks began to crystallize, and soon, sharp shards of ice formed in the ship's launch tubes. With a flick of her wrist, she unleashed them into space. The frozen projectiles flew toward the Zavrak fighters, slicing through their thin hulls like knives through butter. Two of the enemy ships exploded in fiery bursts, sending debris scattering across the asteroid field. "Yes!" Elias shouted, punching the air in triumph. But there was no time to celebrate. The largest of the Zavrak ships, a battleship bristling with weapons, was closing in on them. Its powerful ion cannons began charging, aiming directly at the Sol Invictus. "Elias, we can't take a hit from that," Nara warned, her voice filled with exhaustion. "Shields failing." "Then we'll have to take it out first," Elias muttered. He turned the ship toward the massive enemy vessel, his heart racing. It was a suicide run, but there was no other option. "Girls, if you've got anything left, now's the time to use it." The final push. Talia's wings fluttered furiously as she released another burst of pheromones, flooding the cabin with a sense of calm focus. Elias felt the tension leave his shoulders, his mind suddenly clear. "Iona, can you form a water spear?" he asked quickly. Iona nodded, sweat beading on her forehead. She reached out with her mind, drawing every last drop of moisture from the ship's reserves. A massive, rotating spear of ice formed outside the ship, glistening in the faint light of distant stars. "Launch it, now!" Elias commanded. The spear shot forward like a comet, piercing straight through the Zavrak battleship's hull. For a moment, the enemy vessel seemed to hang in space, frozen in time. Then, with a deafening explosion, it erupted into a ball of fire and debris. The remaining Zavrak ships hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Sensing their moment of advantage, Elias punched in the coordinates for another hyperspace jump. The Sol Invictus vanished into the void, leaving the shattered remains of the enemy fleet behind. Safe, but not for long. The Sol Invictus emerged from hyperspace in an uncharted star system, far from the reach of the Zavrak consortium for now. The cockpit was filled with a tense silence, broken only by the labored breathing of the crew. Elias slumped back in his seat, letting out a long breath. "Is everyone all right?" Nara, Talia, and Iona slowly made their way into the cockpit. They were pale, exhausted, but alive. Nara managed a weak smile. "We survived. Thanks to you." Elias shook his head. "No, we survived because of you three." He turned to face them, his expression serious. "But we can't keep running forever. We need a plan." Nara nodded, her eyes glinting with determination. "The Zavrak will not stop. They will come again." "Then we need to find a place where they can't reach us," Elias said, a new resolve hardening in his voice. "Somewhere we can regroup, rest, and figure out how to fight back." Iona looked up at him, her eyes filled with newfound hope. "We will fight together?" "Yes," Elias said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We're in this together now. But first, we need to find a safe haven." As the Sol Invictus cruised toward a distant, unexplored planet on the edge of the galaxy, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Zavrak wouldn't stop until they had recaptured the girls, but Elias was more determined than ever to protect them. For the first time in years, Elias Voss had found something worth fighting for. The battle among the stars was far from over, but for now, they had earned a moment of peace. And together, they would be ready when the next fight came. The Sol Invictus drifted silently into orbit around an uncharted planet on the fringes of known space. The view from the cockpit was breathtaking, a green and blue world with swirling clouds that promised a safe haven. Elias Voss watched the scanners intently, searching for any signs of pursuit. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the radar was clear. "This is it," Elias muttered to himself, releasing a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "We might have found our sanctuary." Behind him, Nara, Talia, and Iona stood, gazing out the viewport with wide, hopeful eyes. The girls were still weak from their earlier battle, their powers drained to the point of near exhaustion. Yet, as they looked at the verdant planet below, a glimmer of hope sparked in their tired expressions. "Let's head down," Elias said, turning to face them with a reassuring smile. "We'll scout for a place to land, somewhere hidden where the Zavrak won't find us." The girls nodded eagerly. For the first time since Elias had found them, their fears seemed to have lessened. He set a course for the surface, carefully navigating through the planet's atmosphere. The ship rattled as it descended, but soon they broke through the cloud cover, revealing a lush landscape of dense forests, towering mountains, and crystal-clear lakes. "This place is beautiful," Talia whispered, her wings fluttering softly. The calming pheromones she released had an immediate effect, making Elias feel lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "Let's hope it's as peaceful as it looks," Elias replied. He guided the ship toward a secluded valley surrounded by towering cliffs, hidden from view. After landing on a flat plateau near a waterfall, he powered down the engines and activated the ship's camouflaging system to hide their presence. "All right, let's check it out," Elias said, grabbing his equipment. "Nara, Talia, Iona, you were with me." The airlock hissed open, and the group stepped out into the fresh, untainted air of the new world. The scent of wet earth and wildflowers filled their senses, a welcome change from the sterile environment of the ship. The sound of rushing water and distant birdsong was a soothing melody after the constant tension of space. For a moment, they all just stood there, taking in the beauty of the world around them. Iona's hair seemed to dance in the breeze, while Talia's wings caught the sunlight, casting rainbow reflections on the ground. "Let's explore," Elias said, smiling at the wonder on their faces. "We need to find a source of food and shelter. If this place is going to be our new home, we need to make sure it's safe." Exploring the new world, the group moved through the forest, marveling at the vibrant plant life and strange, iridescent insects that flitted through the air. Nara took the lead, her bioluminescent veins glowing faintly as she scanned for energy sources that could be useful for their survival. Talia floated above the ground, using her heightened senses to listen for any threats, while Iona stayed close to Elias, her eyes wide with curiosity. As they explored, they came across a small clearing by a serene lake surrounded by tall trees with leaves that shimmered like emeralds. It was the perfect location for a camp. The water was clean, and the soil was fertile, ideal for planting crops if they decided to settle permanently. Elias let out a sigh of relief. "This is it. We can make a home here." Iona clapped her hands, her eyes shining with joy. "A home, for all of us?" "Yes," Elias said softly, looking at each of them in turn. "For all of us. But we need to be careful. The Zavrak might still be looking for you, so we have to stay hidden." Nara nodded, her expression serious. "We will protect this place, protect each other." Elias couldn't help but smile. These girls, who had been abandoned and hunted, were now filled with a sense of purpose. And somehow, against all odds, they had become a family. Nara, with her ability to manipulate energy, helped power up a small generator using crystals they found in the mountains. Talia used her pheromones to keep the local wildlife at bay, ensuring they wouldn't be disturbed by curious predators. And Iona, with her control over water, created a sophisticated irrigation system to cultivate crops from the seeds stored on the Sol Invictus. The bond between Elias and the girls deepened with each passing day. They laughed together, shared meals, and even told stories by the fire under the twin moons that lit up the night sky. For the first time in years, Elias felt a sense of peace that he hadn't known he was missing. But even in the midst of this newfound happiness, a shadow loomed over them. Elias knew that the Zavrak would not give up easily. He kept a close eye on the skies, scanning for any signs of incoming ships. A visitor from the stars. One evening, as the group gathered around the fire, Nara suddenly stiffened, her eyes glowing brighter than usual. "Something is coming," she said in a hushed voice. Elias's heart sank. He rushed to the ship's scanner, which he had set up on the edge of their camp to monitor for any signs of pursuit. The radar was lighting up with a familiar, dreaded signal. "They found us," Elias said, his voice barely more than a whisper. The Zavrak were closing in. A single battleship, larger and more imposing than the ones they had faced before, was descending through the atmosphere, its black hull gleaming ominously in the fading light. "We have to move," Elias said urgently. "Get to the ship." But Nara held up a hand. "No," she said firmly, her eyes glowing with a fierce determination. "We will not run this time. We will protect our home." Elias was about to argue, but the resolve in her eyes stopped him. These girls were no longer the helpless fugitives he had rescued. They were ready to fight for the life they had built together. The final stand. The Zavrak battleship landed in the clearing with a thunderous roar, its massive doors opening to reveal squads of heavily armored soldiers. Elias, Nara, Talia, and Iona stood side by side, ready to defend their sanctuary. Nara stepped forward, her veins pulsing with energy. With a cry, she unleashed a wave of raw power, creating an impenetrable barrier that deflected the soldiers' plasma fire. Talia flew into the air, releasing clouds of pheromones that confused and disoriented the attackers, causing them to turn on each other in a frenzy of friendly fire. Iona, her face set in a mask of concentration, summoned water from the lake and formed it into whips that lashed at the soldiers, tearing through their armor. Elias, armed with his blaster, provided cover fire, picking off enemies with pinpoint accuracy. But the Zavrak were relentless. More soldiers poured out of the ship, and a massive, armored figure stepped forward, a Zavrak commander wielding a heavy ion cannon. The ground shook with each of his steps as he aimed directly at Elias. Before the commander could fire, Nara gathered the last of her energy, creating a focused beam of light that sliced through the air and struck the cannon, causing it to explode. The blast sent the commander flying back, and with a final scream, he was engulfed in flames. As the remaining Zavrak forces retreated back to their ship, Elias and the girls stood victorious, panting and bruised, but alive. The battleship took off, leaving the planet's atmosphere in haste. For now, they had won. A new dawn. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Elias and the girls sat on a rocky outcrop overlooking their new home. The air was filled with the sounds of life birds chirping, water cascading down the nearby waterfall, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. "We did it," Iona said softly, leaning against Elias. "We protected our home." "Yes, we did," Elias replied, his voice filled with pride. "But we have to be ready. The Zavrak won't stop looking for you." Nara nodded, her eyes still glowing softly. "But next time, we will be even stronger." As the sun rose, bathing the valley in warm light, Elias felt a surge of hope. They had built something worth protecting, something that was truly theirs. Whatever came next, they would face it together. For now, they were safe. For now, they were a family. And that was enough.